All right, please give it up for Michael Campbell.
Well, certainly, it's great to be here, by the way, and I'd like you to know I thought you guys were so important. This is a true statement. I have not had a suit on in 3 years. I was thinking about this the other day, that I'd done over 350 appearances on TV without pants. That is a true story. I have not worn pants on television since around the pandemic, though, but before the pandemic. So you guys must be special if I'm coming looking presentable like this. But it is great to be here, and I'm really glad you're here. My thanks to Mindset Wealth, to Rob, Jessica, for all your efforts to make this happen. I'm just back, by the way, from Los Cabos, where I gave a speech, and I was thinking about all of us deserve a little bit of a break, right? I mean, it's been a tough 2 years, and some businesses done better than others. One of the things I'm always fond of saying, I make no mistake about it, my pandemic was not the same as many people I know. We mentioned about Special Olympics. I know lots of people. You know, my pandemic was not the same as a single mother who's got a child with Down syndrome, and they're in a one-bedroom apartment. You know, and so I'm very sensitive to that fact. I'm not so sure how many Canadians are sensitive to the fact that this has been a very difficult time, but I thought this is great. I get to come up to the Comox Valley. It's beautiful here. There's so many things to offer. I know I'm not supposed to say that in Vancouver because more of them will come up here, but so I'll be careful. But as I say, I just got back from Los Cabos. I thought this is going to be great, but I got to be honest and tell you about a weird incident, though. It wasn't really positive. As I went down to the pool, and I was swimming, and it's really hot down there right now, at least in my book, 33 degrees, 34. So I had one of those sun shirts on so I don't go lobster on myself. Okay, so I'd been in the pool, and it was a quiet pool over on one side, very quiet down there at this time of year, other than the conference that I was speaking at. Okay, so I get out of the pool. I sort of think, okay, I'm going to take this sun shirt off and put on a dry shirt on. So I'm in the process of doing that, and I look around. Well, all of a sudden, there was nobody there. This older guy is walking toward me. And he's not even 10 feet away, and he looks up and goes, "Olivia?" Olivia? He thought I was his wife. And we don't even have the same color bathing suit, but I want you to know, I didn't know who should be more insulted, me or Olivia. By the way, I also bumped into a couple people who I hadn't seen, again, everything's like pre-pandemics, like, before BC and AD. Well, it was pre-pandemic, haven't seen in about 3 years. It was very nice. They said, "Oh boy, you haven't changed a bit." Well, maybe you've got a little more gray hair. Okay, well, maybe you've gained a few pounds. Well, that's not the first time I've heard that in the last while, so just allow me to set that straight before I get going here. My New Year's resolution this year was to lose 10 pounds. And I'm within 20 pounds of that goal right now, as I speak. Also, I don't want you to waste your time. I mean, most people might appreciate that. I do. I spend an inordinate amount of time researching. I'm a dull guy, so I do a lot of research. And I want to make sure your time was well spent here. So I just read a piece of research that I think is important, that you'll find important, and that's especially if you're married. And that is, the stats are very clear, that women who gain a few extra pounds after marriage live longer than the husbands who pointed out. So I want you to be sure. Now, normally, by the way, I feel a bit anxious when I come and I speak about economics and finance and all that stuff, because that's not top of the list for most people. I don't feel that way right now. I think what's gripping us in the world today is so profound, impacting all of us. Whether we recognize some of the factors that are impacting us or not, it is impacting every one of us. I mean, you've noticed it. You go to the grocery store, you paid more for food. You go fill up at the gas. We have Vancouver with North America's record high gas prices today at $2.41. So again, you may not make connections, but this is impacting us all the way. I mean, I think this is the most difficult time for individual finance in generations. I think I'd probably have to go back to the Second World War and the disruptions people had to face at that point. And I'm going to explain why I think that is. And to be blunt, my models have been forecasting this very clearly. I mean, for years we've been saying, 2014, we said, get into US dollars. US dollar is going to be the last currency standing. Money's going to pour into the US looking for safety. By the way, the model also pointed out, gave a warning that we were coming up in 2000 10, in February, I said, we're at a 5,000-year low in interest rates. And so I said, by August of this, that was February, I said, this coming August through the fall, you want to lock in your borrowing and sell your bonds. Well, I'm sure I've heard from a lot of people they were glad they did just that. But here's why I'm telling you that. The track record of the modeling I use has been excellent. And the model is telling me if you thought 2022 was sort of chaotic, difficult, whatever adjective, 2023 is much more so. We just saw a hint of that earlier this week or last week, can't remember, when there was a planned professional detonation of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines coming into Europe. That was a terrorist attack. If they're upping the terrorist quotient of this current Russia, the rest of the world standoff, we're in for serious times. And the model has been pointing to this. That's why I'm not sort of shy about talking here today, because I think it's that important. Think of the stuff, though. Like, I have never had to follow more issues on a daily basis. Like, it is ridiculous how much research I'm doing, but think about it. Because we're dealing with rising cost of living. We're dealing with rising, exploding interest rates, I'd call it. Record energy prices and shortages. You've got food shortages. You've got fertilizer records being set. You've got, gas, diesel, jet fuel, all through the roof. Russian invasion of Ukraine. I have to look at that stuff every day. Political tensions with China, talking about going into Taiwan. Again, each one of these, and the US dollar, but each one of these, I could talk about, because it merits this attention, I could talk about each one for an hour. No, I said I could. I'm not going to. I think I heard somebody cry there. But I promise, I won't talk for an hour, but I'm just making the point. I can't think of an environment I've ever operated in, and I'm old. It's just incredible. And they're all important stories to say. Think of the headlines. The RCMP gets 120 calls a day about Chinese clandestine activities in Canada. 120 a day. I talked US dollar. At a 24-year high against the yen, 37-year high against the British pound, that is not business as usual. Either is the price of investment-grade corporate bonds. They're on track right now for the largest drop in history. Some are being right now, depending on the one, but 18 to 20%. It's the same thing, though, with the 10-year government bonds. On pace for their biggest drop in history. And the impact is huge on pensions. Pension funds own hundreds of billions of dollars worth of bonds. They've just taken a major hit. But they've also taken a hit in the stock part of their portfolio. And that's not supposed to happen. It was supposed to be buy bonds because when stocks go down, bonds will be good. Buy stocks, because they'll be good and bonds can just do nothing. No, they're both down significantly. That is not business as usual. So my thing is, if you don't pay attention out of those kind of headlines, I'm not sure what would get your attention. The big challenge, though, is so much of what's happening is beyond our imagination. I'll give you an example. We met here, let's say 7 months ago. We were here. And I said, hey, you know what I think is going to happen with interest rates? I think they're going up 1,300% in the next 7 months. Come on, not one person in this room would have believed me. And that's exactly what's happened. And they tell us there's more to come. The list keeps going. What about if we had met in March 2020, right? This is just when they were going to call the lockdown. And I said, hey, guess what? Every major, even minor, real estate market in the country is going to see double-digit gains. And you're going, are you kidding? Tens of thousands of businesses are getting shut down here. We've got millions of people out of work. No, you wouldn't have believed it. And here's one that blew people away. We meet in January 2020, and I said, hey, guess what? By May, the price of oil will actually be negative. It'll sell for under zero. The reason is they didn't have the storage, so they were paying people to take it away from them. But it doesn't matter. You wouldn't have believed me. And then I say, well, don't worry, because 18 months later, it's going to be $125. You would have gone, no. And I'm only bringing that up because we have to understand the environment we're operating in. There's so many more things. Do you think anybody in Europe thought their gas bills were going up 1,200% last September? Happened in the UK. It wasn't anything to do with the Russian invasion. It was already happening. Coal prices, oil, Natural gas up hundreds of %. And this was last fall, not sanctioned. Sanctions exacerbated a problem that was blatant beforehand. Again, all of those things were beyond our imagination, and I bring it up because I want you to think about what I'm about to say. My message is that none of us can afford to ignore what's going on. J.P. Morgan, I love this quote, use it all the time, because he says, you can ignore politics, you can ignore economics, you can ignore finance. Trouble is, they won't ignore you. Whether you were paying attention or not, your home is probably 15 to 20% less valuable than it was maybe 8 months ago, a year ago. Didn't matter if you were paying attention or not. Didn't matter if you were paying attention, you went to renew your mortgage, you went, what the heck? You know, you took it out in 2017 and it was 2.8%, now you're renewing at 4.4 plus. You know, it doesn't matter, it's still happening. But if you don't pay attention, you can't prepare. Energy prices are the one for me. I mean, there's nothing more important than energy. No, nobody's here today without energy. Nobody cooked today without energy. Nobody's warm this winter without energy. And the list of, nobody has, you can tell, polyester clothing without energy. You know, we didn't pay much attention. And now this will be, Russ, you were saying the views expressed are my own? Yeah, they are. Believe me, don't blame them. But come on, most of us didn't pay any attention to the climate agenda. Pollster phones up and we say, we're all in. Nobody asked how. Nobody asked what's it going to cost. And clearly, and this is the most thing that some people won't like, our politicians weren't prepared at all to do anything but talk. You know, and we're living the results right now. I mean, to me, it's astounding. I mean, we had people in charge, activists and politicians, who didn't understand straightforward things like, you want a renewable grid? Great. How long? How long is that going to take? We don't have the copper. We don't have the nickel. We don't have the lithium. We know, and there's no debate about this, we're going to have a massive increase in mining. Great investment opportunity, but that delays, the fact that we have no plan for this, delays the timeline. How did they not think about that? Nobody in this room would say, I'm going to build a house and never think about where you're getting the materials. I mean, my favorite is this though. I mean, I've asked tons of experts about this. How did they not know that the sun doesn't shine every day? How did they not know that the wind doesn't blow? That's exactly what happened in the UK last September. They had weak winds in the North Sea, so they didn't get the power. And then they couldn't figure out, I wonder what we'll do when that happens. That's been the story that we've been living. No backup power. And Germany, that's not ideology, by the way, that's stupidity. I'm not debating climate change. I'm just saying you want to do something, you might have a plan. Well, think about Germany. It's already had to shut down 20% of its manufacturing because of high prices. The big worry is what happens in the winter. Their energy bills are through the roof. And I mean, they're through the roof in Italy too, and that's what created a new person elected this past week. This will absolutely create political change, social change. You've got protests throughout Europe aggressively, and our media is not covering it. Why? Because they've got energy prices through the roof, food prices through the roof. I mean, it's not tough to understand. But think about what Germany did. So, German government, which was dominated by the Green Party, spent $500 billion on renewable energy. They decommissioned 3 nuclear plants that were providing power last December. We're going to decommission the rest this December. Now they've extended it to April through the winter because they don't have any power. Okay, so what happened then? The wind didn't blow, sun didn't shine, they had no fossil fuels and no nuclear. So who did they buy their energy from? Vladimir Putin. At the rate of $250 million a day. European Union, in the year before the invasion, bought over $400 billion worth of energy from Putin. That's a long story. That's one I could talk an hour about how it all happened. It's mind-bogglingly simple. They were warned not to do it by President Obama. They were warned by President Trump, don't do this. I mean, after all, Soviet Union had invaded Georgia in 2008, invaded Crimea 2014. It's not like you couldn't notice that, but they didn't somehow. The point is this: how could our leaders have not understood the first criteria is making sure that we have access to energy? Well, they didn't do it throughout Europe. They are scrambling right now. They're seeing their energy bills go through the roof, and there will be deaths through freezing this winter. The biggest thing they're praying for is a warm winter. I mean, they need, there's just so many structural problems that they've created. Now, I got to tell you, by the way, I don't like talking about anything political. I really don't. People are tribal about it. They seem to have more emotional investment in politics than they do their own families. And it's not that I don't know that. I learned that the hard way a long time ago. It was like, my kids were in elementary school, and there was, you might remember some of us, the federal election in 2000. It was just after former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau had passed away. And Jean Chrétien actually came over to the North Shore, one of those photo ops. He was at the suspension bridge and went and talked to a group of grade 5 students, of which my son was in that one of the classes. And he's talking about the tragedy of the Prime Minister's passing. But he looks at, there's a lot of blank faces, well, actually like this group here, a lot of blank faces. And so, I mean, it was not a surprise. The kids weren't born when Prime Minister Trudeau, Pierre, was in office. So, I mean, it's not likely they're going to know him. So he stops and he goes, okay, does anyone know what a tragedy is? So one little guy from St. Pius actually put up his hand and says, yeah, it's like when we're playing ball hockey in the street, a car comes and hits us and kills one of us. He goes, well, no, that would be an accident. Well, another little guy puts up his hand and says, well, how about if the school bus was going up to Whistler and we were on the Sea to Sky Highway and we hit some black ice and the school bus went right over the cliff and we all died? He said, no, that would be a great loss. So no one told me, but as I read it in the North Shore News, there was a little boy named Charlie, my son as it was. He stood up and said, well, what if you were going back to Ottawa and somebody planted a bomb on the plane and the plane exploded and you died? They did it on purpose, so that wouldn't be an accident, and according to my dad, it wouldn't be a great loss. So I'm very careful about what I say. So I apologize in advance if I've insulted your politics. I'm talking reality, though. I'm talking what people are dealing with, and there's easy to get to. By the way, Russia is making more money right now from oil and gas right now than before the sanctions. It's easy to, I mean, this was mind-blowingly stupid. Here's a commodity that Europe cannot live without. They had no alternative supply. Great. So let's make it even more scarce so the prices really go higher. By the way, the opposite of what they did when Saddam Hussein in that war. They actually increased supply to lower prices so that Saddam was hurt by the low prices. You know, his export revenue dropped. That's not what they did here. And they didn't do it because none of those leaders wanted to admit that they were going to increase oil and gas supply. But, I mean, it's just one head shaker after another. And my point also has to be, we're not done yet. This isn't over. It's not going to be over next April. No, end of the era of cheap energy is over. Nobody is going to step up and say, gee, I'd like to invest in oil and gas if I'm a company. Production. Why? It's going to take 10 years. 10 years, billions of dollars. And the governments have all said, and we don't want your product. Why would they do it? It's the same thing happening to refineries. Mike Wirth is the CEO of Chevron. He says, a new refinery will never be built in my lifetime in the US. Same problem. Don't ask me to put up 5 to 10 billion. It's going to take 7 to 10 years. But you've told me clearly, including after the invasion, that we're not going to use my product in 5 years. Well, no one in their right mind is going to make that investment. The structural problems with energy are permanent. And we're going to see these nice little ups and downs and up, higher, ups and down, ups, higher. It's a great investment opportunity if you look for the right stuff. Hey, let me ask you this before I go further. If you could think of two variables, maybe call it to screw up, that would cause massive social unrest, what two would you choose? Food and energy. What have they screwed up? Food and energy. This is not small-time stuff. Throughout the world right now, you have revolution happening. Sri Lanka is a failed state. They burnt down 38 houses of politicians. But they were outdone by Ecuador, who put out hunting parties for politicians. 101 countries that I've counted have severe financial problems, like their currencies have been devalued so greatly. But with that devalued currency, they still got to buy oil, which we all think has gone up. Imagine them, they think it's gone up times 10. This is major, major stuff. You know, I'll give you one thing on food. I mean, this is one of those I could talk for an hour on, but I found it flabbergasting. So what are the ingredients of nitrogen-based fertilizer? You need fertilizer to grow food, right? What are the ingredients? Oh, ammonia and urea. And where do they come from? Natural gas. So let's not produce natural gas so we can make sure that fertilizer costs go through the roof, and especially in developing nations, they won't be able to afford to use it. As I said, I could do an hour on actually those relationships, but it is that straightforward. You cannot produce nitrogen-based fertilizer without natural gas. So natural gas prices going up. Ammonia last year was my top pick, up 600% in 2021. No wonder fertilizer costs went up over 100%. It's impacted you already. You know, it's a portion of your food cost. There's other reasons for sure. You know, transportation, diesel costs are up, same thing. No refinery capacity, price of oil goes up. Man, it's hitting you everywhere, whether you're paying attention or not. Let's talk about, you know, I only have time to spend 4 hours here. I want to talk about two other issues. Inflation and interest rates, and they're both closely related. Interest rates, because the central bank thinks I can only quell inflation if I raise interest rates, because that will discourage you from borrowing money and buying stuff, right? So I'll tell you, one of the challenges I have in forecasting, it's changed. It's simply dominated by central bank and government actions. So what I'm really doing is forecasting what the central bank's going to do, what the government's going to do. I mean, think about it. It was the government policy to lock down the economy. They didn't do a cost-benefit analysis, but that produced the sharpest economic decline in generations. And it was the government policy coming out of it to spend hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions in the US. Well, that was the foundation of inflation that you're dealing with right now. Come on, they were sending checks to dead people. You might remember, seriously, in April of 2020, the CRA said, hey, there's a lot of fraud going on. And the government said, don't worry about it. We know that 86 cents in the dollar went to people who were not impacted financially. One of my favorite stats comes from Canada Revenue Agency that told us that 8.9 million Canadians received a CERB check for 2000. The only little kind of catch there, that was 3 times more than the unemployed. We sent $636 million to high school students. 40,000 grade 9 students got money. I mean, all I'm saying is that you flood a system with money. Milton Friedman told us right from the get-go, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomena. Well, Canada threw 27% new money into the system. Whatever we had got up to 2020, we added 27% in just 2 years. The US added 40% in 2 years. I mean, there was no chance. I mean, think about it. We also had record savings because we had been locked down with restrictions, so we hadn't been spending money on much. We had the central bank creating record low interest rates. I mean, I don't know how anyone's surprised we got inflation out of that, because we also had supply chain problems. So we had less things to buy, or what was available. We had more people bidding on them with more money than ever before. Presto, we had inflation. You know, what's widely not appreciated with the housing boom was in March 2020, I remember, you know, when they said this, and I did a little thing on TV, Remember, I mean, we were panicked, the pandemic, what it means, what's going to happen, am I going to drop dead in the street, whatever it was. And then the central bank, our Bank of Canada, came out and said, we'll guarantee all mortgage borrowing. Like, are you kidding? You've just taken the risk out of lending? You know, and everyone's going, sign me up. You know, record low rates to boot. That's how you blow up asset prices. And reversing that is how you get them back down. You know, it always killed me, by the way. Oh, by the way, what doesn't seem to be widely understood in this environment? Like, as I say, if you have a home, and you've worked and you've got a home, and it's down 15, 17%, whatever, that was the Bank of Canada's goal. I listen to news reports like they think it's a surprise. There's no one in the Bank of Canada that doesn't know that when you raise interest rates at the fastest rate in a generation, stocks are going to go down. Housing's going to go down. Every asset's going to go down. It's not a surprise to them. It was their goal. It's called the reverse wealth effect. You see, when you start worrying, oh God, I'm getting poor. Oh, I'm hearing those headlines. It's scaring me, this, that, and the next thing. You're much more reluctant to spend money. You know, it's nothing, you know, I'm going to be a little more cautious. I've done that myself. I'm going to be a little more cautious right now. You know, I could say something. Not everyone in our house feels that way. But I'm going to be a little more cautious right now. That's what they wanted. The less people out there buying and spending money, it reduces inflationary pressure. So, as I say, I listen to stuff on the news and I go, holy smokes, they don't get that. That was their goal, to reverse the wealth effect. By the way, I always got a chuckle when I hear politicians patting themselves on the back because we've had an economic recovery. And I'm going, what would you expect if you borrowed $500 billion in 2 years and spent it? Like, that's like saying, hey, that guy had a hell of a party and you found out he borrowed $1 million to have it. It was never going to be the recovery when you're borrowing and spending like that. It was always going to be what happens after you stop doing it. After you stop spending at that rate, after you stop having interest rates at that rate. Well, that's the environment we're living in right now. We're starting to find out. You know, it's funny though, looking at the results, I just think it's very easy to think they have no idea what they're doing. Come on, right through December of last year, they were saying, don't worry about that inflation thing, it's just short term, it's transitory. I mean, I'm going, wow. It reminds me of a little story. It's just a little story. A woman's in a hot air balloon. She realizes she's lost. She lowers her altitude, spots a man in a boat, and yells out to him, excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend that I'd meet him an hour ago. I don't know where I am. Well, the man took out his portable GPS and says, well, you're in a hot air balloon. You're about 30 feet above ground. We're 2,346 feet above sea level. You're 31 degrees, 14 minutes north latitude, 100 degrees, 49 minutes west longitude. She just rolled her eyes and says, you must be a conservative. I am, but how did you know that? Well, everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to do with the information. And I'm still lost. Frankly, you've been not much help. The man smiled and says, well, you must be a liberal. Well, how'd you know that? Well, you don't know where you are or where you're going. You've risen to heights due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise that you have no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve your problem. You're in exactly the same position you were before we met, but somehow now it's my fault. Look, here's the thing though. There are no easy choices for the Bank of Canada. Think about this. We have record government debt, right? We have record corporate debt, record individual debt. So as they raise interest rates, obviously that becomes more onerous for individuals, for debt financing. We just had the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Yves Giraud, come out and say the debt, interest on the debt is going to move at least double over the next 5 years, right? Because as bonds mature and you have to do it at a new level again. So it's doubled over 5 years. From 23 billion, he says interest expense will be 46 billion within 5 years. I mean, obviously that's going to be, you know, a lot more onerous, but what's the bank supposed to do? Because if they don't raise interest rates, then you're going to have inflation just continue. The confidence in our dollar is going to be eroded as a purchasing power, as it already is. People will seek alternatives to holding the paper. So what are they going to do? It's like the proverbial rock in a hard place. Happening in a worst case in Japan right now, worst case in Great Britain. You either defend your currency, which is their primary job, by the way. That's their mandate. Because again, once you lose faith in currencies, they have a word for it, Venezuela. They have another word, Zimbabwe. They have, again, we're not as international as maybe we could be in this stuff. Everywhere you look, you've got countries. Turkey, Turkish lira down 50% in the last 6 months. Now again, the implication of that is Turkey's got to buy energy. They have to buy energy. And the price of energy's gone up, except for they're purchasing in lira, right? So it's way worse for them. We think it's gone up. Wait till you own a lira and try that, or an Argentinian peso, or a Brazilian real. This is the really serious stuff that's going on. But it reminds me of Woody Allen's line. He says that more than any other time in history, we face a crossroad. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other to total collapse. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose correctly. I'm sure that's what they're thinking. There are no easy answers left. Just like if you borrow just a ton of money, your options get reduced. Your interest payments go up. Other obligations hit. That's the world we're living in. I just want to give you one word about inflation before I'm done. I mean, it's certainly not difficult to understand why, poll after poll tells us, both Canada and the US, that inflation is the number one issue. Cost of living, number one issue for individuals. I mean, think about this. So we got our inflation number in August at 7%. We know that the average Canadian worker makes about $1,100 a month. So stuff they bought last year for $100 now costs them $107. That's what inflation means. That's an extra $78 a week. Here's where it gets tough. That's $4,000 a year. And the clincher, that's after-tax dollars. So you got to go out and make the average Canadian worker's got to make $5,200 more this year to keep up with last year. And of course, they'll pay tax, and that's what leaves them the $4,000 to pay for stuff. Well, again, that may be doable for you. Gas prices at $2, $2.25, that may be doable for you. Food prices going up at 11.8% may be doable for you. But please, don't do the typical thing I've seen from politicians and really the majority of the public. It's not doable for a huge number of Canadians. Starvation is not a doable thing in Africa, in parts of South America. I've just been amazed how insensitive we are to the plight of others. As I said earlier, my pandemic wasn't like their pandemic, I'll tell you. I never worried about a paycheck. I'm a laptop guy. And I'm saying we just have to get sensitive to what it's like for those people. The other part of inflation is this, though. We all know that governments borrowed record amounts of money. Well, who's going to lend it to them? Who's lending it to them at 5% if inflation's running at 7%? That would be nuts. You're guaranteed to lose 2% a year. Right now, the 5-year Government of Canada bond is 3.5%, just under. Well, I'm not lending it to the government by buying a bond, because I know inflation's 7%, it may go down some. I'm not going to guarantee I'm losing purchasing power. Like in my example earlier, the stuff's going to cost me $107 extra a week, and I'm getting the equivalent of $103. Well, I'm down $4. So that's the thing. So inflation must come down, and interest rates must come up so they can finance our debt. That's one of the other dynamics that's in play right now. The bottom line is this. Only a couple minutes left, so stay with me. The bottom line is this. I said it was the most difficult period financially in your lifetime. That's why. You've got a central bank who wants the price of your assets to drop. You've got a central bank who says, if you borrow money, it's going to cost you more. But even better, I encouraged you to borrow money with record low rates. Now I got you. Now you're going to pay more. At the same time, you have a government says your number one commodity, energy, is going to go up in price, which will impact food, impact many other things because things get transported. That's not easy. So I think one of the big challenges here as I say, if you sort of close your eyes and you look out 5 years, I'll give you a choice. You can either own what I call paper, that's your currency, 20s and 50s, just that special paper with ink, or do you think you're better protected if you own oil, if you own gold, if you own copper? That's the dilemma. I personally prefer to own stuff. When they can just print, they can't just print up oil. They can't print up lithium or copper, but they can print up those dollars. That's why the British pound took a beating over the last week, because they said, we're going to help you with your energy. We're going to just create out of thin air 150 billion pounds. Well, people on the sidelines going, I don't want that paper. When they can just snap their fingers and that's what they get. So that's your challenge. And you have to, as I say, that's why you deal with professionals. Because this is something, as I said right at the outset, that you can't ignore. It's coming. It'll be the biggest change in my lifetime. And you're already seeing, I tried to lay out the evidence where you're feeling it. And so we know that the most vulnerable are getting killed. What we better appreciate, when you start bringing gas prices at $2.50, you're going way above the vulnerable. You're now, and combined with food, combined with their interest rates. I know if somebody's going to sell their farm because of the interest rate change. They just literally can't afford the extra payment. They're going to be selling. So it is going to impact us. This is real. As I say, in the battle between virtue signaling and rhetoric, reality is undefeated. And Europe has now entered the age of reality. We have in these other ways, not as dramatically, but that doesn't mean we won't. Gosh, throughout the rest of the world, the reality is they're lynching politicians. And this winter in Europe is going to get a front row seat. People have a tendency to get angry when they lose their job. 20% of manufacturing shut down in Germany. They have a tendency to get angry when they can't afford energy. And they can't afford food. That's the environment. So, it's incredible. But as I say, for you individually, if you're worried about energy, great. Canada energy stocks are fantastic. If you're worried about the buying power of your currency, well, traditionally gold's been good. Real estate's been good. But it's all part in cash. I don't mind cash right now, but it's all part of a plan that's conscious and aggressively, entertaining and reviewing. And that's what these guys do. It's a huge challenge. Let me finish with just one little story, because I was talking to a friend of mine just a couple days ago. I told him I was coming up here to speak, and I said, I hate speaking when I can't deliver nothing but good news. But as I said to Russ earlier, hey, it's not bad news. If you're in the right stuff, it's good news. If you got a big chunk of U.S. cash, you're just sitting there laughing. If you're in the right stuff, if you're in the wrong stuff, it's difficult. You didn't want to own the British pound, that's for sure. But I was telling him about this, and I was sort of going, oh my gosh, people won't like it. It's easier to, politicians know that. That's why they just give pablum to you all the time, and I don't deal in that. But, so he said, you know what, that's nothing new. I have that problem in my life all the time. He said, I just had a problem with his wife, Nancy. I just had a problem with Nancy. I said, well, what was it? He says, well, when she went on that trip, about 4 weeks ago, she'd gone for 4 weeks, and while she was on the trip to Europe, she gave me a call. This is about week 3.5. And she goes, we're chatting away. She got home. She says, well, how's the cat doing anyways? And he said, well, she's dead. Nancy sort of recoiled and says, what? You can't just say that and blurt it out. Can't you, set me up a little bit? Give me the slow truth. And Jimmy said, well, what the heck does the slow truth mean? She's dead. But his wife said, well, you could have started maybe week 1 and told me that when I asked about the cat, you'd say, well, the cat's up on the roof. And then maybe when I was in Rome, a couple weeks ago, you could have said, she had a bit of a fall. Last week when I phoned from Dublin, you could have said, well, you had to take her to the vets. And then today when I phoned, you could have said, she passed away. And Jimmy's thinking about this, but as he is, his wife goes, hey, by the way, how's my mom? And he goes, oh, Christ, she's up on the roof. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, thank you, Michael. Oh, sorry.
Well, that's no Disney movie, but we had a choice. I contacted Michael's people, and I met Michael for the first time. I can't remember, early 2000s, we were on our way to Omaha. I said, someday we're going to bring him to the Valley. And I've been listening to you ever since on the radio and now the podcast. But we had a choice, April or September. So September historically is one of the most volatile times in the stock market. So I thought, when we get people out, and wouldn't you love to be an investment advisor right now? Isn't it? It's great, other people's money, it's what we do. It's wonderful, that's how Michael started. But I'm gonna just bring it down a little bit and ask you kind of a softball question. Well, actually, it's a super important question because it comes up a lot, especially when I'm talking to parents. So I have a grade 12 student in the house today, and we have some young people here today. What advice would you give to young people in the backdrop that you just said, going forward, college, university, trades, anything you got there would be wonderful?
Well, I think first of all, it's really important to understand that learning is a constant. And I don't mean that cliche, a lifelong thing. I'm smiling at my son, he's 32 now. When he was in high school, in grade 11, he said, I'm not taking math 12. I don't need it, He's got a younger brother. So he goes to university and he's a basketball player at college. And I said, that classes will be involved in this situation, And so he goes, and he started, to get interested in stuff. And he finally gets into, in second year, and he needed that math. They called it something else. It was math 12. So first of all, he has to get tutored by his brother, the younger brother, on that. But the point being that I've been amazed at how constantly he learns. He now does artificial intelligence, machine learning for investments, especially in the crypto space. And I'm just saying, boy, that's a kid who never stops learning and reading. And I was very impressed with him. His other brother's done better, younger one, but same thing. So the first thing is to say we need a culture of learning, and that'll change. You're going to change your job 10 times, 12 times in your career, but your ability to learn is going to set you up and protect you in this kind of an environment. So that's one. I mean, we also know for sure that it's sort of an intellectual world. I would get them involved with computers early and machine learning early. You can't afford to, people my age have to always play catch up on that area. And we can't afford, they literally can't afford, I can't believe in high school, for example, we do not emphasize tech literacy, like in an aggressive way. They're going to be lost without that. I got credit for a line years ago by this fund manager, and he told me then he's going to use it all the time. I said, you just wait, within 5 years, every business will be the technology business. Everything will be about how you adapt it, how you use technology. So that's the next thing. You have to have technological literacy in the extreme. And then when you're looking about careers, what is incredible is how fast they change. The way that we're going to practice healthcare is going to change dramatically. How every business operates changes dramatically. And so, again, it's that flexibility I would encourage people to do. And then it's, there's nothing special about it. Follow your passion. Because if you are following your passion, you will work at it. You got to find something you love, because, I used to play a lot of golf. I never felt I was working when I was golfing or when I was practicing, or I played also basketball in college and never felt like it was work. You're finding something you love. So, if you've got nieces, nephews, grandchildren, I think that's where you're steering them, is a love of learning, a love of technology introduced in a fun way. I think school has to be a lot more. My wife, by the way, was a teacher for about 35 years. So and I coached in high schools and stuff in the school system and volunteered and other things for about 25 years myself. My mom worked in a school, wasn't a teacher, worked in administration in a school forever. I think there were slate and dinosaurs she wrote in on. But so it's not that. It's just we have to engage dramatically here. We have to make learning fun. We have to make the evolution of their learning capacity fun. So it's all of those things, and it's a big challenge for all of us. And what the school system, I don't expect them to do it all. I expect the home to do a lot of it. I'd never assume the school system was going to teach my kids. I had a teacher, and I had me. So at the very least, they were going to grow up. I used to do stuff like pay them we didn't give them money. You could earn money, you just didn't get given money. So it would be things like, the kid laughing, they'd have to read the newspaper and I'd grill them. And I was cheap too. Like they'd have to read, like it was like 25 cents. But in the end of the week, my gosh, they could come away with $1. Oh, that dad's a rich guy, But I'm just saying, I could tell you lots of stories, but that's the emphasis I'd place.
Thanks, Michael. Between Russ, Rob, myself, we each have over 25 years of dealing with clients, real people, and man, the stories we could tell, it could be a Netflix original. Like it's Nortel. Right? We were there when everybody needed to own Nortel, right? And junior mining stock phase and all the pot stocks and the marijuana stocks, and people absolutely needed to have that kind of stuff. And after things didn't go well, you kind of knew the strategy was, people who bought those things, the strategy was to buy high and sell high, right? So I think that the impact that we've had is having to deal with unprecedented events. 9/11, there was no playbook for that. A global pandemic, no playbook for that either. And we kind of came out of it pretty good. And so sort of the things that my question really is, inflation we've seen before. There was a good stretch of it really in the 70s there. And because it's happened before, there's precedent. Would you say it's more of a manageable situation for investors as opposed to things that we didn't have any precedent for?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a good question. There's a couple of things there I'd comment on. One is, what are the lessons? Like I'm constantly thinking, the one thing I love is there's a scorecard in investing. And I can think of so many lessons I've learned. There's nothing that informs the mind like losing money. And then being the type of person who's honest enough to say, where did I go wrong? What was I thinking? And one of the things that, of course, we've just been through an environment of really incredible emotional moves in the markets that make no sense at some point. But do we have the perspective to know that? Do we have the perspective to say no? The funny one in our house was Peloton, because my wife's very good about riding her Peloton. And she would ask me about the stock. And I said, well, at the rate they're valuing that stock, we'll all have 6 Pelotons in our bedroom at the rate they're pricing it. Of course, Peloton fell 90%. But look at all of those stocks that did. But they were in the froth. And I think that's an important lesson of what we've just been through again. And I appreciate what you're saying earlier. That's not a new lesson. We've seen this in the market before. I just read, non-fungible tokens. Those were the things like Beeple was this artist who put his non-fungible token artwork up and he got $69 million. The volume on non-fungible tokens is down 97%. Try selling it. Liquidity is important, but it's really tough for people to say no, and worse for advisors. There's no win in that, because the proper thing to say is back off, or maybe it's you're taking a hell of a risk. Because then the person doesn't do it and it keeps going up, you go, oh! But look at Kathy Wood, who's got the most famous mutual fund in America called ARK. ARK was full of these sort of really flashy new tech things, great stories. They're going to change our lives. You're going to plug this in and grow a limb. It's everything. Well, that ARK is down, I don't know, it's now 68% or something, 70%. And that is a lesson to come out of this period. If you didn't have to learn it the hard way, all the better, but learn it. But just know it's really tough for advisors in that environment. Because you say no, and it goes up, oh, you cost me money. You say yes, and it is going to go down. You didn't protect them. I just hate those kind of questions. That kind of situation. Look at Tesla taking a beating now. Look at Apple taking a beating right now. Look across the board. You have to buy. That's why Warren Buffett buys value, as Robert and I were down at the Buffett thing, Berkshire Hathaway. You've got to buy value. You've got to know who you are. You've got to know your risk profile. You noticed something earlier. I said, I know I'm risk averse. I just worked too hard for my money. I came from a single mom family, and my sort of, we're never going to go. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. I said, my kids are never living in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I'm risk averse. I know myself. We joke about it with some of the pros I deal with, that I'm not a trader. Oh my gosh, am I not a trader? I'm an investor. But you got to know that. Mistakes I've made is, why were you thinking like a trader right then? You know you're an investor, and I've made that mistake. You know, lots. So it's a wonderful endeavor is investment, because Bernard Baruch, famous investor from years ago, said, if you don't know who you are, the markets are a very expensive place to find out. He also said, if you're in a poker game and in the first half hour you don't know who the patsy is, you're the patsy. So, I mean, so the inflationary period we're in, it's got a lot of similarities. Inflation is another way of saying your currency doesn't buy as much as it used to. I just think we're going to see that in a more extreme way right now. And I think our whole goal as individuals is to protect that purchasing power. Because as I say, you can go now to first world countries like Japan, Europe, UK, and you are really suffering because you didn't figure out how to protect your purchasing power. And now it buys a heck of a lot less food, heck of a lot less real estate, heck of a lot less energy. You know, so I think that's the goal in the next few years, protect your purchasing power.
Okay, so one more question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. Mike, you've had a fantastic career. You've been in this business for a long time.
Have I ever? Look at
You're here with us. What keeps you going? What keeps you doing this?
It's interesting. I am absolutely fascinated by this. I started and took political science in 1801. I took political science. And then I realized I can't understand political science without understanding economics. And then it actually went, I don't understand economics because I don't understand taxes. And I took courses all the way through, like a tax diploma and stuff like that. But it's a sincere interest about what makes things go, what makes our societies work. Now I have an added one that adds to my worry is about my grandchildren. You know, it's, I'm just very, very motivated in that way. I think it's fascinating, incredibly challenging. And another motivation, I think we have exceptionally poor leadership. And I think the media is ill-equipped on the most part, generalization, okay, generalization for sure. You know, we had the Prime Minister say, in the September 21, during the campaign, the federal campaign, he said, one of the guys asked him about the Bank of Canada, he says, well, you'll have to forgive me, I don't think about monetary policy. And again, I'm not saying he's a liberal, conservative, and NDP. I guarantee they don't think about it either. That is the number one issue in the world today. That's interest rates, that's currency rates, you know, that's deficits. That's why you're seeing the gyrations in the commodity markets. That's why you'll see collapse also in the West. And they don't think about it? Well, that's the same guys who don't know that the sun doesn't shine every day. I'm being serious. It's astounding to me. They don't know, I mean, you're on your own here, you know, with professional help. But you're on your own. You think the government's going to help you? No, they want to reduce your standard of living. Holy smokes, they've made it clear. Bank wants to reduce your net worth. Don't look to them. Look to exactly what you've done tonight, and I congratulate you. You've come out, you listen to somebody, you can think critically about it. You know, you can look there and say he doesn't know what he's talking about, but God, he looks fabulous. You know, that doesn't matter. But you're on the right track, and that's why I'm saying, as I said, throughout the talk, it ain't going to ignore you. So you better not ignore it, you know, in that way. But yeah, I'm surprised too. Like, I know that I'm still, my wife is too, how passionate I am about it. But I just turned 71 last week. Oh, no, oh God. Do you realize that is? That's like, my God, he's still alive. That's the, he's still alive clap. Like if I said I just turned 37, you go bullshit. But let's say you believe me, you wouldn't be clapping if I brought someone, I'm 36 years old. Who cares? No, 71 is a very difficult age. I'll tell you why. I am now in the age where every compliment comes with a caveat. Like, he's looking good for his age. He's breathing well for a man his age. Who wants any of that? The other thing, I'm going to walk out here, get hit by a car. I'm over that period where they go, well, what happened? How old was he? No one's going to say, geez, that's young. Instead, they're going to go, well, isn't that a shame? And then forget about it and just walk on. So, yeah, I'm amazed. I'm still absolutely as passionate, but I think it's also the period we're in. This is a period my modeling has pointed to for years. The next 8 years are going to be chaotic. It's a monetary system change. And we're seeing it, like I gave that list. That's what those weird numbers are about. That's historic change. So hopefully I can help somebody appreciate and understand it, but also it's fascinating.
I know Canada's very happy that you're 71 because now you're riffing and
Yeah.
we're making more money, which is great.
I
so
hated
we're
that phone call, by the way,
Yeah.
when I got a call from
So we're
a friend.
going to open it up to questions. So what I'll do, maybe I can give you the mic if you want the mic, or maybe repeat the question if
Yeah.
you don't mind. I think it sounds pretty good.
I have
Go
the
ahead.
ability, though, of make someone, I don't want any more of this, I got to get out of here.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Residential mortgage rates over the last 25 years, variable has always outperformed fixed. Do you have any comments on that, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's all about your risk aversion. You can imagine how often I got asked that since I started. I mean, I broadcast 40 times in that period, that sort of August into that year in 2020, that lock in your rate. And I had people I worked with say, well, I've got this, I should be in variable. So it's always about the risk. I would literally say, what would a 5-year cost you or 7? What does a variable cost you? So I can just think of one because I worked with her on TV. And I said, okay, so it's $33 more to lock in and never have to worry about it. And that was in sort of the September 2020. Is that worth it to you? It's a $33 insurance policy for 5 to 7 years. And so I can't tell her if that was worth it to her. Luckily, she locked in. She actually likes me now. And, but yeah, so I think it comes first of all down to those kinds of things. So let me answer another way and say, I think there's still risk in the interest rate market, but the risk isn't what the Bank of Canada does. The risk is why the Bank of England acted this week. What do they do if everyone starts to sell their bonds? What do they do if everyone says, God, I'm looking at that inflation, they're never getting it under control. I'm getting 3%, it's going to be running at 5 to 8, I'm out of here. Remember, the very process of selling bonds lowers the price, right? That raises the interest rate on them. If they're paying you $10 on a $100 bond, but that bond all of a sudden becomes worth $50 because everyone sold it, right, and the price went down, you're still getting the 10. That's a 20% interest rate all of a sudden. That's the dynamic I'm worried about. I think that's legitimate risk. We've seen it in many countries already this year. That's clearly what the central banks are worried about. In August, we had the Central Bank of Europe meet with Greece, Italy, and Spain, because that was starting to happen there. Nobody wanted to own, hey, I got a great Greek bond for you. Nobody wanted it. Well, then if you don't want, it works like this. I need to borrow money. So I got a bond for you. It's 3%. You go, no. Okay, 4%. No. 5. No. 6. No. 7. It happened September 16th, 2019. This is what started the whole process. There's something like institutions, banks, companies, they borrow and lend money on very short period. Like they might have a little cash flow problem. So they go out and borrow. That market stopped, literally stopped. There was no overnight when the lending could be 14 days or whatever. They call it the overnight market. So what do they do? Well, I'm a company, I need that cash. I got a payroll on Monday. I gotta have that cash. Oh, what if I pay you 4%? No. What if I pay you 8? No. The interest rate went from around 3% to 10% in 24 hours. That's the worry. That all of a sudden, and that's why central bank, by the way, what happened then is the central bank stepped in. Well, nobody else is going to do it, so we will. And we've never stopped. They've never stopped. The bond market is in trouble, and that's the big worry. So it's all of those things that keep me up, So if I'm going to take a variable rate, I better make sure what my benefit is. Is it $112 a month? Okay, that's fine if you say, yes, that's good enough for me. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that. I'm saying understanding the things you'd ask yourself about it.
Mike, I'll remind you that we're on Facebook Live, so let's stay right on the podium and let's not move around. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? So my answer to that question, if I could,
yes,
I agree
please.
100%, but to me it's just like what Mike said, know who you are, right? There's some real estate people in the room here that will tell you, I'm always going variable, but it depends on the cash flow and who you are. So old school real estate guys, variable, all paid out in principal. So, other question?
Plus, sorry, Rob, but you're looking at someone here who was around for 14% mortgage rates and 19. You know, I mean, our imaginations have to expand. So I agree completely. Know who you are, but know why you're doing it, what risk. As I say, my friend at Global, it was $33 difference. She did it, and she's thrilled she did.
100%. Another question, right up there, blue shirt.
The governments, when they're in trouble, fiscally, monetarily, whatever, as you say, where are they going to turn? They're going to turn to taxes? Any thoughts on personal, corporate, GST taxes?
Yeah, I think, first of all, great question. Think of what they've been doing. You know, also, I mean, I'm with you completely. The governments, what's their biggest problem? They're desperate for money. You know, and the fact that they borrowed so much and interest rates are going up just makes them more desperate. So I think they certainly have looked at taxes. That's why you have the NDP saying, let's do a wealth tax, even though there's no, wealth tax was instituted by 17 countries in Europe, 13 reneged on them, or stopped, you know, withdrew them because they weren't making any money. But they, I mean, I'm not knocking the NDP, I'm just saying research isn't really something that informs government policy very often. But they are desperate for money. They're going to look for taxes. You're living in a province that does not have a GST rebate, you know, unless you're at the lowest income. Well, the GST is going up $15, not the GST, I'm sorry, I should have said the carbon tax, pardon me. The carbon tax. We're in the only province without a rebate scheme. It goes to low income, they do cover the low income. Carbon tax is going up $15 a year, every year, through 2030 till it hits 170. So don't think. Inflation. So what's inflation going to do? You're starting to see it. People are going to get higher wages. Guess who gets a bigger cut? Government. The bracket you are in does not keep pace with inflation. So a portion, like I think this year, they're allowing 2.4% change in the bracket, like higher. But so if you've got a 5% raise, government's taking more money on the 2.4. What about the things you buy? So you buy stuff, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, it could be a car or whatever, and you paid GST and PST on higher prices. So that portion went up. One of the things that's concerned me, we were chatting about earlier, is Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has their third study on taxing your primary residence. And the guy who was their head guy doing the research said it's our patriotic duty to pay more money if you had a house that went up in value. You notice they never talk when it goes down? Your housing all went down. No one said, well, we better give them a rebate. We better help them out. But I think, why do they look at real estate? In this province, again, spec tax was put in by the NDP Green Party. Andrew Weaver, head of the Green Party, said it's a tax grab. You know, but empty homes tax. All of these things. I'm saying there's just a message. Most people have the majority of their assets in real estate. That's where they're going. Poland, I love this. Poland, they went after their personal pensions. In Spain, because no one else was buying the bonds, they said that all pensions, like your RSP, had to be 100% in Spanish bonds. But the problem is they're desperate for money. Not too desperate that they didn't give themselves 3 raises during the pandemic. I'm not talking that kind of desperate. I mean, the list is just so long. You look at the bonuses handed out in the last year during the pandemic. My favorite was the tourism department. There was no tourism. They got on average $30,000 in bonus. You know, but it's a great question, and that's what I'm aware of all the time.
And to be fair, I've been listening to Michael for a long time. We talked a little bit about our premier related to Michael, brother, at dinner. But he's critical to both governments. You are a little hard on the NDP.
Absolutely. No, but
the question right here.
Yes, so you're talking about governments needing money, and we've seen unprecedented lending of money, creation of money.
yes.
In particular in the States. What do you think, like, how do you see this playing out? What do you think might be the ultimate resolution to the debt crisis in the States?
Yeah, I think it's a great question and a great observation. You know, too, they spent $6 trillion, you know, made it up. You know, what they did is Treasury, I mean, it's just laughable. Central bank makes it up, then buys from the Treasury. Well, really? That's how they financed the pandemic, because you were not about to buy and lend money to the government at 2% with all that uncertainty. So the government did it that way. I think, but your question is the essence of what the debate is right now. If we were in New York and, I brought 50 analysts together, they'd be debating that. That's the question. How's this going to end up? So my guess is your currency just buys less and less. Like, it'd be like this. Can you imagine if you lent the government $1 million in 1950 and they're going to pay you back today $1 million? We get that doesn't buy you anywhere near what, $1 million in 1950 probably wasn't a house in the province selling for $1 million. And now you get an apartment in downtown Vancouver. That's really to the government's advantage, to devalue the purchasing power of a currency. So that's where I think they'll go.
Do you think they would ever maybe divorce themselves from the world monetary policy and independent America?
Impossible with global trade. So how are we going to trade? How are you going to exchange goods and services? But I think all the action is on the monetary side now, the money side. And the action we've seen is that they're devaluing the purchasing power. That's why I think it's so dramatic and so profound and misunderstood, that kind of thing. I'm amazed. Sorry, I'll repeat a little bit because this is the essence. If they keep raising rates, the economy slows down. If the economy slows down, their tax revenues go down. Oh, but they need even more tax revenue to service that debt and pay the entitlements they've promised. Not workable. Inflation is a way out. So,
If I was president of the United States, maybe a 2% GST would work down there. But they don't like taxes.
Remember, because they don't like federal taxes.
No.
That'd be a statewide thing.
Yeah. Questions? I think right there.
Mike, you mentioned the central banks a number of times. There was a number of years ago, probably over 100 years ago, that the Canadian government could get money from the central bank for no interest. Why did that happen? And who is actually controlling the central banks in not just this country, but all the rest of it?
Okay, well, first of all, are you saying I was around 100 years ago? Okay, well, I was actually. And, well, yes, it's just wondering if you went back 100 years, the government could borrow money from the central bank would create money, and then the government would borrow it at zero interest rate. So also wondering who controls the central banks. First of all, it's different in every country. Our central bank is not like the US. The US has seven central banks that all work together. The Central Bank of New York and California and all that, San Francisco it is rather, all of that. So it's a different system in every country. It's probably the problem they have in Europe, that they all have separate systems. You know what I mean? Like the Germans didn't want to be responsible for the Greek bonds, and that's why fundamentally years ago I said the euro is going well below par. It's structurally wrong. We also have this: when governments control central banks, that's how you get runaway inflation, because the government is going to do stuff that suits its own political purposes. That's the surest way of collapsing a currency: have the government control the central bank. Argentina, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, the list is a long, Turkey, Ecuador, gosh, the list is a long one. So, there's no simple answer. I mean, the Bank of Canada Bank of Canada, we're talking now, is an independent entity. But the government appoints the governors of the Bank of Canada. Well, there's nothing to own really. They do have a balance sheet, and that's exploded because it's now full of government bonds, and it's the government's liability. Do you follow that? So the central bank buys all the bonds from the government. But if something, like right now, this is why no one should ask me a question because I never shut up. Okay. But it's so important. You have to get fundamentally. If you own a bond and interest rates go up, the value of your bond goes down. Like, who the heck wants a 1% return if I can go just to somewhere else and get 5? So I'm not going to pay you as much for your bond. So it goes down. So that's important to understand. So in Japan, they've had negative interest rate bonds since 1989. So if interest rates go up there, the bond losses are incalculable. There's so much money going to be lost. Just like our pension funds are losing record amounts of money right now because they own bonds. They weren't zero, but they're owning bonds. You know, they bought all those bonds for 2%, 1.5%. You know, so they're in trouble. And the Bank of Canada, the government's responsible for that. Yeah, so that's your system. Sorry, there's no easy answer to that, especially when every central bank's different.
Okay, we have time for
12 more questions.
two more questions. Go right here and then Colin, and then we'll shut her down. So right here and then Colin.
I would like to know, you know, if you look at the inflation, the cost of money, what is your kind of for the business and also the labor force, what will be the result or what's coming about the labor settlement, the cost of labor, and also in the long run, say for the next 2 years?
Yeah, so what's one of the things is that inflation hits different places, different times. You know, for example, the real estate industry was hit about 15 minutes after they started to raise rates, right? Other industries haven't been hit yet. One of the things is wage increases are just coming. We've had a start. Well, that's inflationary. Well, the central bank can raise rates. It isn't changing energy prices. Doesn't matter. They don't influence that. They won't influence. You know, the wage settlements are going to go up. I don't see how they get inflation under, you know, back to their 2% target. Other than remember, you're going to get a number coming up in October. They're going to compare energy prices with last October. Well, there's going to be a very small difference. Like oil was about $85 a barrel then. It's going to be about 85 now. Gas it's going to be a little higher, but not dramatically so. So how they measure inflation is important, you know, and all that stuff. But yeah, I think first of all that you're going to see there's a labor shortage big time in the States and here. 1 million jobs still missing people in Canada. That puts real upward pressure on wages. Great for workers, you know, with skills especially. Not all workers have the same set of skills. Not all areas are the same. But in a lot of certain industries, man, is that ever good? It's the best labor environment over the last 3 years, and you know I can remember in a few decades. So you're going to finally see wage catch up. That'll produce inflation.
Okay, Colin?
A lot of your talk tonight, you've been bouncing back into the politics side of what's happening in our country. It makes me think that in our last federal election, we had, I think, the voter turnout was 62%. And the Liberal Party won the government with, I think, about 33% of that voter base, which equates to an actual, like, 20% of the eligible voter base in Canada. Or you could say that another way, 80% of eligible voters didn't vote for the Liberal Party. And do you think part of the problem and how we got here is that us as Canadians have taken our finger off the pulse of politics, not been as engaged with our politicians and representatives, and not holding them accountable? And do you think a way forward out of this would be for us as Canadians to become more engaged and get back in charge of what's happening in our provincial legislatures and in the municipalities level?
Yeah, I think first of all, fundamental problem is the economic and financial ignorance. You know, we graduate. Yeah, well, we have hundreds of thousands of kids graduating every year without one iota clue about finance or economics. You know, so that is a problem. You notice I started today. I mean, my big theme is you got to pay attention. So I'm agree, but it is a problem that we have a lack of sophistication. I think the period we're in, though, will change some of that. I'll give you an example. So, anybody here protest yet that gasoline hit $2? Just put your arm up. Actually protested. You know, like got a sign, like there are in Europe, like the farmers are in Netherlands, like the Italians everywhere are, that they just reflected in their vote.
Not just swearing at the pump, you mean?
Not just swearing at the pump, exactly. Okay, so no, let's keep going. Can you imagine, put yourself there, if it's $3 a liter? Do you think then you would maybe do a little more than complain at the pump? How about $4? Interesting. $5 at the pump. See, this is Canada. Like, at what point do we get engaged? Clearly there was a group, whether you liked them or didn't like them, but there was job losses, and that was the truckers' convoy. And some people liked them, some people didn't like them. I'm not talking about that. One thing I was critical of is if people didn't understand that. And I made that simple comment, like, really funny how when you're going to lose your job, it pisses people off. That seems to be a complete mystery to some people. But my point is, okay, so that was the first time I've seen a sizable group get really engaged. I mean, we let 20 people who don't understand climate change control climate policy. I'm going, P.J. O'Rourke had a great line. He says, nowadays, young people will do absolutely anything to save the environment and the planet, except read a piece of research. And I think that's right. How many of those school kids who went out about 4 years ago with Greta could have told me the relationship? I said, do you realize you're protesting to starve people? No. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, yeah, I don't know what it takes for Canadians to be engaged. I don't know what Canadians care about. I'm optimistic that will finally stand up. In Europe, I bet they're caring. I mean, look at the protests. Maybe that's what it takes, a shortage and stuff like that. I just worry how extreme things get before people do get involved.
Does part of have to do with our subsidized media in Canada not covering events?
Holy cow, Colin.
That's certainly, wait, I just was writing something on this because in this week in the Commons, I forget which committee it is, they had several people from the media and they were actually saying taking the government money encouraged people to distrust the media. And I think there was, and I'm there. I think there was strong censorship during COVID, not to question the government's pandemic response. I think there's been strong censorship, not to question climate change. And I think I don't care where you stand on the issues, we should be very wary of anyone who says don't question. Yeah. All progress comes from questioning. And I think there was, interesting in that committee, there was a consensus that if you took money, the public would think that you're under the influence. And I'll just give one other example, because they talked specifically about the CBC, and I'm going, are you kidding? They sued the Conservative Party during the 2019 election. Their three major unions are registered as third-party opponents of the Conservatives. Forgive somebody for drawing a line there. I mean, again, I don't care who you support. I'm just saying, how's anyone going to walk away from that and not think, you know what, I don't think they like them. And they're the only party saying, we're going to defund you. Let me finish with one quick story, Rob. One more?
Yeah, well, just because we're almost there.
Okay.
Just because that was political. I tell my kids to have 2-minute showers for climate change. But
that's what, with each other? Or what?
No, 3 teenagers in the house. So one more question, if we have time, and then you can finish with your story. Come back to me. We have one more. I thought we had right there. Sorry. Yeah.
This is more of a personal question. I think in your speech you mentioned you had a portion of your portfolio in cash.
Yeah.
How long are you going to leave it in cash, and when are you looking forward in the future to invest that money?
Okay, so it's a good question. First of all, every one of us has a risk profile. But that risk profile isn't just financial, it's emotional. And I found that emotionally, I was not a trader. Like that was an emotional profile too. I had to, if you don't know who you are, it's an expensive place to find out. So I know that about myself. So I have to start with that context for myself. For me, not so much age, but age does play a little part in it. I went and bought a new car not that long ago. You asked me if I wanted an extended warranty, and when I stopped laughing, I said, I hope I outlive the car. So that does play a part. But I look at this environment, I feel there's high levels of risk. That's not after the market dropped 500 today. The record is very clear. 10 months ago on Money Talks, we consistently, weekly said, it's time to reevaluate the risks you're taking. I do a talk with my friend Victor Adair at the end of every show. I bet 90% of them talk about risk. He is a professional trader. And we talk about the differences. I'm an investor, he's a trader. My time frame's different, that kind of stuff. I'm also, so I don't mind holding cash in this period.
With inflation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I'll tell you what. So let's say inflation's running at 7%, and I was going to buy Tesla. Well, I can buy 30% more Tesla today than I could 8 months ago. So I'm beating inflation because I am going to employ that cash. Yeah, I mean, there'll be, but I'm going to employ it. My big thing is protect my capital. So I'm looking for an entry point for more oil and gas. I'm looking for an entry point for more base metals. I have a 5-year time horizon. I won't care. In the same way, when I invest in real estate, I don't start looking at what I could list it for 2 weeks later. You know, I have that time, and I'm on real estate. Just no one asked, but you should have. No, I'm just kidding. Real estate, because I was doing a real estate conference, and it was all real estate. And I said, obviously you get a shock to the system when you raise rates faster than the last 11 years combined. You do that in a few months. So there's that shock treatment, you know, oh, what's happening? I said, when that sorts out, you got 1.3 million newcomers coming into this country. They're going to live in Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. That's going to take the majority of them. They got to live somewhere. But we already knew we had a housing shortage. Wait a second. We had a rental shortage. Wait a second. That didn't change. Nothing's changed structurally about the housing market at this point. So what I think adjusts, once we get over the shock, isn't activity. I'm not surprised activity's fallen back. Why? Because it was at this ridiculous frenzy. So I don't think anybody in the business thought, well, the frenzy's going to go forever. No, it's going to come back to something more sustainable. But it will. The adjustment will be on price. I'm still buying, but we have to wait because people are very stubborn about adjusting their prices. You know, so they'll finally not sell, things won't go, and then they'll make that adjustment that compensates for the higher mortgage rates. So I think, you know, but yeah, I'm looking to preserve my capital. And number one is that'll really buy nothing. So I'm quite aggressive about adding to it. I also don't make all or none decisions. In other words, if I said I want to buy gold and I think it's, well, I happen to think it's going lower, but when it does, I won't buy, like, and I wanted $10,000 worth of gold in the end. I don't buy $10,000 worth that day. I know I'm going to be wrong, you know, so I buy 1,000 or 2,000, or I take a first step of half my position and then add one by one. All about risk management for me. So here's my story. Okay. Because this came, I was thinking about the questions. This is a friend of mine, good friend of mine, analyst, lives in Princeton, New Jersey. And when you give a talk, he's asked to speak between the Joint Economic Council of the US. Big time for him. Like, he was excited, like, this is big, a recognition of his techniques and his approach. But there, you don't fly there, you drive. So we had a driver, you know, a guy who regularly, when he had those kind of 3 or 4 hour trips, regular driver. So we get in the car and he's going down. This is a big day for him. He's excited and nervous. So he's just going over his speech again and again and again. The driver finally looks back and says, "Boss, you have said that speech so often, I could do it in my sleep." My friend looked at him and said, "Really? Well, what size suit do you wear?" He says, "A 40 regular." He says, "Pull over." Well, my friend put on the chauffeur's outfit, and the other guy put on the suit. They get down. The driver does a brilliant presentation to the joint, and then they start asking questions. And when the first question comes up, I think it was Milton Friedman, and he says, "This is a fascinating approach, but I've got to think, how are you juxtaposing M1, M2, M3 money supply figures out of Japan and the US when we don't have the same aggregates?" Well, the chauffeur looks at the audience and says, "You know, when I'd come to Washington, I'd get a better caliber of question. You know what? That is so easy, I'm going to let my driver answer it."
Before I turn it over to Rudy to officially thank Michael, September is conference season in the investment world, and Rudy and Russ were in Whistler and Vancouver, and I was in Huntington Beach early on in September. At our business, we get a chance to see fantastic speakers, and I had a chance this September to meet 4 of the main podcasters that I listen to religiously. Obviously, Money Talks is one of them, so please listen to every Saturday. For sure, I've been listening for years and don't agree with everything, but I'm not supposed to.
You should have said something about that.
Yeah, well, it's going to be.
I know, look, anytime I speak, I know not everyone agrees, and I like them to know it's okay for them to be wrong.
Yeah.
So.
And I love seeing speakers, and obviously the people here do too. So follow Mindset Wealth. So that's a pitch for Mindset Wealth Facebook page, because we'd like to bring in one a year if we could. But we need the support to do that. So, and thank you everyone here for doing that. I'm going to pass it on to Rudy.
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, you came in here today, all the way to the Comox Valley, to deliver a big time message that I think a lot of people needed to hear. But he also did it in the context of raising money for Special Olympics Comox Valley. So I told my manager in the Vancouver office I was coming down here, and he goes, who's speaking? Oh, Michael Campbell, great, fantastic. And he goes, is it for a charitable event? Yeah, we're covering the costs and the money's going to charity. And he said, great. He texted me, just put $500 to Michael. So that was before breakfast, right? This is a pretty good hourly rate. I should text a few more people that you're coming out, right? So,
Yeah, thanks.
yeah. So thank you so much for that, Michael. With our group here, from day one when we started Mindset Wealth, it was based on a few fundamental principles based on doing this for so long. The main principle was really, there's a lot of things going on, but from when we understood, there was always one rule that worked for clients is, it's not what the markets do, it's what you do. And from Michael's message really is, it's no longer fine to be passive anymore. You really have to get your act together and put something together, because it could be a tough stretch going forward. But even though the markets will be volatile, it doesn't mean you have to experience the same thing. We've got a diverse group of people here, different backgrounds, different incomes. But the main universal thing we all share is we all have problems to solve and goals to achieve. And I welcome anyone just to give us a call, take a look at things. We're independent, and sometimes the solution is an investment solution. Sometimes it's a tax situation, an estate planning issue. You'll be surprised what you can get done over a cup of coffee, right? So please reach out to our team if you'd just like to have us take a look at a few things. One of the things we also look at too is the behavior of clients and the impact of what they know doesn't always translate into what they do, right? There's a great book called The Psychology of Money. I don't know if you've read it by Morgan Housel. If you haven't read the book, we actually have a quick video summary. You can reach out to our office and we can send you the link. But he talks about our industry, our investment industry. It's the only industry in the world where, unlike law or medicine or engineering, you need to have the best education in the world and to come from a really good background to be successful. All the success in investing is easily accessible to everybody if you can set your mindset and your behavior on that. So if you want to watch that video, please reach out and our office will get it to you. Just to close off, two things. Tomorrow is National Reconciliation Day. What I always tell people is our job, we look after investments and insurance, but really the core of the job is that we're professional listeners. Our wives might not agree when there's a hockey game on, but it's just sharing your stories and being heard and coming up with solutions. And that's the greatest feeling in the world, is the peace of mind to know that you've been heard. And that's quite a lesson for tomorrow. Please be professional listeners. You're going to be hearing stories of healing tomorrow, and please engage the community. There's a great walk tomorrow, I think, Rob?
11 o'clock. Yeah.
Where's that at?
Sims Park.
Yeah. So please just go there without prejudice and just listen. Listen. Part of the healing process is being present for people and to be heard. The other one is Thanksgiving coming up, and I mean, there's plenty of things to be thankful for, but I'll share you a very quick story and I'll end there. It's a story I read. It's about a little blind boy who sat on some steps in a busy town plaza, and he had a sign that says, "I am blind, please help me." And people would put a few coins in, and most people just walked on by. And a gentleman came up and looked at the boy. He said, "May I have your cardboard sign, son?" He wrote something on the back and reversed it and put it back in his hand. He left and came back a few hours later, and the boy recognized the man's footsteps. And the man looked down, his hat was filled with money. And the boy says, "Thank you so much, sir, but what did you do to my sign?" They said, "Well, both sides of your sign tell truths. But one is your truth and one is their truth." He goes, "What did you write on my sign?" It says, "Today is a beautiful day, but I cannot see it." So as we go into Thanksgiving, please find something to be very grateful for. I mean, with all the things that are going on in the world, how much better can you get being in the Comox Valley? I'm from Vancouver. You guys got a good thing going on here. But as the saying goes, not every day can be a good day, but there's good in every day. So please try to find that during Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for coming on.